Coming to you live from my apartment, it's Rob Has a Podcast. And now here's the guy who's frantically trying to book Keith Nail for the Tar Pits this weekend. I am Rob Cesternino. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our amazing race coverage, episode number 10. Back to a 1 hour amazing race. And it was a very exciting finish here tonight on double U-turn night. Did not go as expected. A lot to talk about here from our leg in Cambodia, and very excited to bring in our panel to break it all down with us. Of course, let's bring in a woman who I'm sure would have no problem with working on the arts and crafts task to make that beautiful tile. Here is Jessica Liese. Jess, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. I'm considering changing my name to Spider because I feel like that's a really awesome look.
That is a nice name. Yeah.
It was really badass. I wanted to be that guy. He was cool.
Yeah. Spider, the third part of Hung and Chi now. He's part of the team. And then, of course, a man who that he is a the monks tonight did not do justice to this man's monk impression from this weekend's Robin Keeping It podcast. Give it up for Mr. Mike Bloom.
Thank you for those who haven't missed out on the podcast. Yeah, I came in, did my best Tony Shalhoub. I ferociously washed my hands over and over again, but I'm happy to be here. I am in bloom, as my name suggests, just like lemongrass and papaya and lime trees and all of the delectable vegetation that Hung was describing to us today.
All right. Well, we are here streaming live after the episode tonight of The Amazing Race. We will have exit interviews coming up with Iswar and Aparna as part of the Tar Pit, and Mike Bloom will talk to Iswar and Aparna for Parade.com.
That'll be up tomorrow. And yeah, I mean, this is a big interview for a number of reasons. First, this is the first team from the Mine 5 that we are speaking to. At this point, all we've spoken to are teams that sort of parroted back this same idea of like, we had no idea there was an alliance really at the time. I think it'll be nice to hear from Iswar and Aparna as to like how they kept the alliance secret. Obviously, they were not in the know that there was an inner core within that alliance. They're going to have a lot of thoughts, I'm assuming, as well about not only the U-turn, but their reaction to the U-turn. So, yeah, I mean, a pretty fiery finish from Iswar and Aparna tonight. Considering everything that happened to them.
Contentious. All right. So we will talk about all that. We'll take your questions as well. I tweeted out a tweet earlier tonight, as one does on the Twitter, and you can reply to get your questions into the show. And of course, this weekend we'll be back together for the Tar Pit. You can email in a question, amazingrace@robhasawebsite.com, and we'll discuss your questions. Jess is going to track down all of the Amazing Race social media, secret scenes, much more coming up this weekend on the Tar Pit. Okay. Let's talk about this. Jess, this I thought was a very exciting episode tonight.
This was really classic Amazing Race for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You had some really interesting strategy that had, like, all of Twitter had a lot of really hot takes about the U-turn, which I'm sure we're going to spend most of this podcast talking about. But you also had a few little classic Amazing Race things. You had great scenery. You had this sort of mini task where you bring a donation. And I always like that chance to get to see the community. And you had one of my favorite things, the point where you have a detour option and you tell your driver which one you want to go to, and he decides for you that you're going to the other one.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen in Water Spider.
Aqua Spider.
Yeah. And a really exciting finish because that I think we all thought coming into tonight, okay, Mike, it's going to be that we know how this is going. Mine 5, we're going to down to the Mine 3, and then D'Angelo and Gary are getting the W turn, and they're going out, and they're going to be the team that gets eliminated. And that was not what happened. And then it did look like for a while that Gary and D'Angelo would, in fact, be eliminated tonight, just not at the reason of being W-turn.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be candid. I think this episode was a shot in the arm that the season needed after the past few episodes, because I think things were fairly rote in what these 5 teams were very successfully, admittedly, doing. But I think even to that extent, because of what came before, a lot of us were coming to this episode thinking, okay, There's this 3-team core, to your point, Rob, they're going after Gary and D'Angelo. And I think you could look at this in paper and be like, yeah, Eastwar and Aparna went, what a predictable outcome. But like you said, the events that we underwent to get to that destination were far from predictable, mainly because, this is the thing that happens with alliances on The Amazing Race, is you can plan and you can plan and you can plan. But if an unbalanced detour causes Gary and D'Angelo to get to that board first, then it all gets shot to sunshine. And that's one of the fun things about The Amazing Race, that even the best planned strategies can't break.
And to everybody out there who says The Amazing Race is boring this season and the Alliance has ruined it.
In your face.
Yeah. In your face. This was an exciting episode.
Yeah, we nearly had a team catch up from being the only team U-turned, which I feel like is definitely a rarity in Amazing Race, much less of a rarity with the institution of the double U-turn. But essentially, this double U-turn was turned into a single U-turn this episode from back in the old days. So I give all the kudos to Eastwar and Aparna for being able to make up the time that they did. It did seem like in general, everyone was just really close together for the entire leg, which again, I think speaks to the strength of these 5 teams. And maybe why, some of the most immediate stuff we've gotten in the past few episodes have not been the most riveting, is because I think this is a very strong group of 5 teams.
All right, well, let's get into all of it. And we are going to head to Cambodia, and a lot of talk about the Mine 5 being dead, a lot of setup of the Alliance. Just the Roaming Gnome was back this week. Were you pumped up to see your friend, the Roaming Gnome?
I love the Roaming Gnome. I don't love him as much as I used to when he used to live tweet the episodes and engage with the viewers, but you can't not love the Roaming Gnome. He's a part of The Amazing Race.
Yeah,
everybody loves the Roaming Gnome.
The Gnome was doing like sponsored brand sassy tweets before Wendy's was. They really patented that brand.
It's true. He kind of invented that. I don't think he really invented that. I'm sure somebody else invented that. But he's an important part of the show, and I hope Travelocity never stops sponsoring The Amazing Race in any fashion so that we can have him every season.
Yeah, the Roaming Gnome is a big hit with all viewers of The Amazing Race, including Hung and Chi and their family as they watch The Amazing Race. But there's something in particular that Hung's family likes about the Roaming Gnome.
We watch Amazing Race with our whole family, so the 3 kids love the Travelocity Roaming Gnome with all of his different accessories.
Just, does the Roaming Gnome have a lot of accessories?
Well, he might have a lot of accessories. Yeah, he has a life jacket. Didn't you see that? He was at his own little hammock in the tuk-tuk.
He had his little seed satchel with the needle for the scale in it.
Yeah. He holds out a little miniature clue, and apparently he hands it to you. But I'm pretty sure that
figure?
The gnome does not move.
Grip. We're encroaching on the holiday season. I don't see why Travelocity can't make a Roaming Gnome action figure. It seems like it's going to be the hit in households everywhere. Do we think that the gnome is to Amazing Race as animals are to Survivor when it comes to kids' interests in these reality shows? They pick on this one thing that they really are obsessed with?
I don't think that the Roaming Gnome has as much screen time. It's they're not just cutting to the Roaming Gnome in transition shots.
What if they did?
Yeah, that would be good. Like a Roaming Gnome and a Mrs. Roaming Gnome and can you believe what just happened? No, I can't.
I would sincerely love that if Austin Powers style cut to little interstitials of the Roaming Gnome just walking along and doing things on the way to other tasks.
Are you referencing the laugh-in style psychedelic dance number? Are we getting one of those from the Roaming Gnome?
Jess, should it be 2 Roaming Gnomes or should it be Phil interacting with the Roaming Gnome a la a Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop?
I have very strong opinions about this,
yes.
As a matter of fact, because there was a fantastic ad 1 or 2 seasons back in which Phil was hanging out at a hotel spa with the Roaming Gnome and speaking to him like he was a human being. And it just melted my heart.
Yeah.
It was one of the cutest things Phil has ever done. And so I would be absolutely here for Mystery Science Theater style Phil and Gnome commentary.
Yeah, Mike, we saw how he worked with the beatbox guy the other day.
Yeah, exactly. Phil has a lot of discourse that he carries on with these pit stop greeters. Just go back to the one you can always rely on. You can always bounce jokes off of the Roaming Gnome. They could do a whole double act in response to Gary and D'Angelo instead of just Phil having to pull all the weight there.
Oh, no, I got it. The Roaming Gnome shows up in the law enforcement uniform of choice. and reports on
We have to call in ATF.
Hold
ATF, come
hold on.
in.
It's me, ATF, Gary and D'Angelo. Your watermelon etiquette is atrocious.
All right. Let's try to get back to.
I think we're just trying to make Hunk's family appreciate the show even more.
Yeah. Man, I hope so. So we have a lot of accessories, like the Roaming Gnome. All right. We have tuk action, and any longtime Survivor fan knows that when you go to Cambodia, Mike, you hang out in a tuk.
Well, and this one is sort of the tuk that we're used to, because I do feel like the Indian version,
not
of
an auto.
Yeah, the auto rickshaw / tuk was more of like a one singular base, whereas I do feel like the Cambodian tuk, much like Keith did, is like a motorcycle that you hitch to this car that you pull. And that's, I mean, it was a little bit of a nothing burger, this clue, right? Of like, help your driver put his tuk back together, which means like, watch him hitch the trailer to the motorcycle and then drive off to the next destination. But yeah, these are the Totos that we're used to. We're about to see some Totos today.
Yeah.
I feel like it was kind of a running theme of this episode that everybody thought they were about to do something very precise and difficult, and then it turned out that nobody actually cares how you do the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, could that be a symptom of, the teams that are left, especially like Hung and Chi, Riley Madison, and Will and James are all like very devout fans of The Amazing Race? Could it be that like the show almost screwed with them by being like, you think you prepare for this super meticulous task, but really it's going to be very simplistic and we won't give you any criteria whatsoever?
It's fourth dimensional chess there, Mike.
Yeah. Try to keep up. So our teams were going to have to then get into ultimately a water taxi. Is that right, Jess? Is that the right vehicle name?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly what they call it there, but it's a boat and it's a taxi. So we've done a few of those this year, and we're exploring all of the most scenic bodies of water.
And I did notice as well, to speak to that point, Jess, that it was like traveling on the water and there was a basket of things you were supposed to keep with you. I'm like, oh my God, this must be PTSD for like Gary and D'Angelo, right?
I was waiting. Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to forget the basket, but I'm sure that
nobody
did. Like, okay, we are keeping an iron grip on this basket.
Yeah. And so we got a lot of like, all right, we everybody knows the plan, right? We're going to U-turn Gary and D'Angelo, but they were right there. They were right behind the big three. And ultimately, we end up with Riley and Madison, and the boat breaks down, Mike. And the show made a little bit of a meal out of Riley and Madison's boat breaking down.
A meal, Rob. It was an entire Thanksgiving dinner if you watched all the promos. When like the next time on, every single commercial, the preview for the episode was all about Riley and Madison's boat breaking down. You would think this was like the thing that would determine the fate of their game. Nope, commercial break's done. The boat starts back up again somehow. It seemed like there was a lot of black smoke pluming out of that thing that they were able to get
monster,
it started.
Mike.
Yeah, I mean, or like the Pope's being determined in there. I'm glad they were able to get it fixed and move on.
That's white smoke.
Yeah, well, hopefully, but luckily it seemed like they carried on. But yeah, this was definitely an example of The Amazing Race trying to pick quote unquote like the most dramatic non-spoiler moment from the episode and try to market it to make people see like, you want to tune in and see what happens when our front runners, the Beard Bros, fall victim to boat mishaps.
Yeah, well, that's classic Amazing Race, though. That's classic Amazing Race editing, and you find out exactly like what a dirty trick this is if you ever watch a whole bunch of Amazing Race in a row without commercials, because you'll get a lot of this, I don't think we're going to make it through this thing. Oh, this is awful. How are we ever going to continue? Oh, wait, we made it through the thing.
Yeah, so the trick, here's a little trick, and I don't know if this is full out Amazing Race 101, but the trick to watching Amazing Race is there are often times when Jess says teams are in moments of struggle and they do this like languishing slow-mo shot of a team getting through a task. If that is happening right before a commercial break, it's going to fix itself when it comes back. If it happens in the middle of an act and it doesn't break for commercial afterwards, that does mean it's a bad situation.
Okay. All right. That's good to know.
Yeah. So if you look at, so if slow-mo happens and there's no commercial, then like, yes, they may indeed be screwed.
Yeah, I'm thinking specifically of the time that the Twinnies had trouble driving stick shift, and the show made a huge meal out of it. And I talked to them at the finale party, and they're like, "Yeah, that took about 2 minutes," and they showed every second of those 2 minutes.
Okay. We see the teams start to get to the monk to provide a donation. Mike, do you guys what were they donating? Is that bags of coffee?
It looked like a couple of
Chips?
bags of chips and bags of coffee. I mean, listen, people need those things. So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if it was like shoes or clothes. I mean, talk about Amazing Race flashbacks. My mind was going back to Amazing Race 19, the infamous double elimination episode that felled poor Ethan and Jenna when like 9 teams got penalties for not donating all their money to the orphans on the way to the pit stop. Like, whenever I think about charitable causes on the Amazing Race, as great as they may be, my mind always goes back to that very bad moment.
Yes. Just did they pick up some items just off the craft service table to donate to the monks?
Yeah, it's possible. They were like, we need to have something to bring to the monks. And like they send their PA out to the supermarket and like, just get like 10 of everything and we'll just put it in a basket.
Yeah. And Mike, luckily, the monk did not reply with, would you like to be a land animal, a sea animal, or an air animal?
The ultimate detour is, it's fish or farm. You turn into a fish or you turn into a farm animal. Or a tree. That's the U-turn. It's like you have to, that's the yield actually, is you turn into a tree for 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about fish or farm. Jess, any thoughts on these detours?
Well, it seemed like one of these classic scenarios. And again, I've been watching a fair amount of Pluto TV Amazing Race ambient channel, which is like the most comforting thing on the planet. Like you just put on your Pluto and in the background, you got Phil going on and you don't have to really pay attention to it because everybody has seen them all. But anyway, Phil used to do a thing.
Pluto TV, all Amazing Race 24/7, and also all Survivor 24/7. I also heard all Price is Right 24/7.
Yeah,
also all
Barker era,
all Star Trek 24/7.
Yeah, Barker era Price is Right too. So it's like you're homesick from elementary school all the time. So anyway, the thing that Phil used to do that he doesn't do anymore that I kind of miss is he would set up the detours and he'd say they have the pros and cons. People that do this task could finish quickly if they do this, but people that do this task could finish quickly if they do that. And this was really one of those tasks that was very nicely set up for that because you could tell immediately if you got all the details right on the garden, it initially might seem like a little bit more brain power to get it done, but you could get it done more quickly. But the fish task, you just have to sit there and go like this, and you'd eventually get all the fish. And it doesn't actually take a lot of skill. It just takes arms and time.
So, so that's interesting. Because that being said, so do you think that, I mean, I think the results speak for themselves, that the first 3 teams to finish are the 3 teams that chose fish over farm. Was it because that Will and James and Hung and Chi were struggling with the garden, or do you think the fish was just a really faster task to do? That's what I thought. It was just a classic case of like physical to get quick roadblock versus non-physical and slow roadblock.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody finished around the same time. I think it was a pretty well balanced roadblock in that regard, but I think you could look at those tasks and you know which one you should be doing. And I think that I think that a little bit of brute force is going to get you through that fish task faster. So obviously, if you are a professional athlete or, people that are very committed to a sport that they never win, you're still going to be pretty buff. So you can go do that one. And indeed, it looked like the professional athletes got through that a little bit more quicker than the siblings who are computer engineers,
Okay, so the teams made it through the fishing net challenge, and I guess the drama there was just going to be, could Riley and Madison, get out in front of Gary and D'Angelo to enact the double U-turn plan, but Gary and D'Angelo end up getting through it pretty quickly, and they both get out at the same time, and they head to the double U-turn board. All right, Jess, do you want to pick things up here?
Okay, I will break down this decision. So the quick recap version of what happens is Gary and D'Angelo arrive at the board like a second before Riley and Madison. And Riley and Madison, who were going to U-turn Team NFL, now can't do that because they're right in their faces and they're ahead of them. So what they do instead is Gary and D'Angelo, U-turn Aparna and Ishwar. And then in order to keep Aparna and Ishwar for then arriving at the board and U-turning either Will and James or Hung and Chi, the Volley Bros then U-turn Gary and D'Angelo, who are already in front of them. And then the term is coined, burning the board. And I've never heard this before. I'm pretty sure this is a first, but it's not the first time we've seen it happen. It's the first time we've seen a label for it. And I think once you label something like this, it stops being emergent strategy. So I would suspect we're going to see some changes to the U-turn in the future to prevent board burning from just being a thing that you expect. Sort of like I was thinking like splitting the vote or doing a backdoor veto. It's something I think we're now at the point where this is going to stop being a thing. I would be curious to know what you two think of this. And I also want to know if you think that this was good strategy or bad strategy, because there were a lot of people that were really, really angry at this move.
Well, so I'll be completely candid. I think the reason why people think it's a bad move is because I think their opinion's a little influenced by the fact that we are seeing a clear alliance of three that they are not in the know of. And they're like, why aren't you doing it? It's very clearly obvious. A, they don't know about it. And B, this is 100% the safest thing to do. Because, like you said, Jess, you haven't seen Will and James or Hung and Chi. For Gary and D'Angelo, right. Will and James and Hung and Chi were out in front of them this entire leg so far. For all they know, they could be inadvertently burning the board by you turning one of them. They have no idea if they're behind them whatsoever. Who is guaranteed to be behind them right now? Ishwar and Aparna. And they even verbalize this of like, it's going to have us stay a little bit far ahead. D'Angelo verbalizes it really well at the roadblock of like, hey, if I didn't U-turn you, I would be in last place right now, which definitely would be the case. It's less so about like, hey, let's strike at this inner core of three teams that we don't know about right now, and more so about we need to stay one step ahead in this race. And if we know at least one team is behind us, the obvious thing to do right now is to U-turn that one team we know is behind us rather than take a shot at a team where we have no idea where they are in relation to us.
Right.
Would it break the game if you could not U-turn a team that was ahead of you? That if you had the information of what place you were in, would that break the game, Jess?
It would break the game, Rob, and here's why. There is no game function where you are allowed to really know how many teams are ahead of you, who is particularly... I thought about this a lot, actually, over the course of this episode. Could we make it so that once you passed the U-turn block, you took your name out of the running? Like, you take your little sticker out and keep going. And I think this would break the game because at that point, that gives everybody the information of who's ahead of you or behind you. And I think that changes things. I mean, on one level, you do know most of the time, you have some clue, but on the other hand, there's a little bit of strategy that you can employ at that point. And you do see a lot of inadvertent board burning that goes away at that point. And you also would have the drama of somebody in last place showing up to the U-turn board and looking at it and being like, well, we were in last place already and now we're completely screwed and there's nothing we can do about it. And then you don't get them for editing purposes. Doesn't really ruin them from a game standpoint, but from editing purposes, it kind of dumps on that team. Like imagine like Kaylin and Haley, for example, being in the last place and getting repeatedly yielded. At a certain point, they kind of stopped trying, and you don't want your teams to ever stop trying. They always need to have that feeling that they could be doing something to help themselves.
How about this? Riley and Madison, Mike, do you feel like, did they let Gary and D'Angelo reach the board first so that they would get the blood on their hands as opposed to being the U-turners?
I mean, it's a good call because even before Gary and D'Angelo beat them to the mat, apparently, Riley and Madison were saying like, hey, these guys are right behind us. We cannot U-turn them straight to their faces. I mean, not only, again, is this going against their whole little apparent nice guys credo, it's also, hey, Gary and Daniel can immediately follow it up by being like, okay, then I'm going to U-turn one of these other teams. And so if they are in the business of wanting to protect this 3-team core, which again, say what you want to, your mileage may vary as to whether or not that is a good move or not. If that is their interest right now, they can't do it when when they know Gary and D'Angelo are right behind them. So at that point, like, sure, let them step on the mat first. They're not going to directly go after you. That it seems like you guys are cool at least. So let them sort of do the damage. They were also talking about you turning Iswar and Aparna. So like, why not have them take care of it? And while Aparna was sort of decrying both teams at the U-turn board, if you notice, when we get to the roadblock, and maybe it's because the Volley Bros weren't there, she had nothing but fury and fire for Gary and D'Angelo specifically.
Jess, if you're Gary and D'Angelo, are you also a little bit when the Riley and Madison are going to burn the board? Are you a little bit like, hey, what gives? Why are you doing that? Because there is no other explanation other than, oh, well, we're just protecting Will and James and Hung and Chi. I mean, that what was in it for Gary and D'Angelo that they did that?
Well,
didn't they show their hand?
A little bit they did, but it's not even necessarily saying we have a core alliance of 3 that we're trying to protect. It's just kind of saying the team that you turned is the team that we're most comfortable getting out of the game. And that doesn't necessarily fully tip their hand. That says we're still working with you because we're obviously not working against you at this point, but we're also working with these other teams. And honestly, it could be a little results oriented to say this, but I don't think that this move totally breaks the game, because what if they get to the final 3 and either Hung and Chi or Will and James win the game because the Volley Bros have saved them? That's gonna, they didn't just guarantee that they didn't just buy themselves a ticket to $1 million here. They might have actually bought it for somebody else at this.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you put yourselves in the mind frame of, if Gary and D'Angelo and the Volley Bros believe that the Fish was the slower option, that they are the 3rd and 4th teams to arrive right now, and you know that there's at least one team behind you, like, might as well pursue that known option. And just, so I feel like, again, if Gary and D'Angelo were so focused on, let's just, Iswar and Aparna, let's just push them down, I can understand why I'd be like, yeah, burn it, because that way, we can just move on and not need to worry about Iswar and Aparna possibly pulling something and being able to use the U-turn as well.
Right. Because then you have a team that is, you want to make sure, like, once you use that U-turn, you want to make sure you don't see that team again, so that they don't have an opportunity to come after you and be upset. Oh, wait, that kind of already happened, but there's not going to be another chance after this leg to affect some other damage on your game. Like, all they really got, their one penalty for deploying this U-turn was they got yelled at a little bit.
They yelled at a lot.
Nobody likes to be yelled at, but
no, definitely not. All right. Anything else on the double U-turn in terms of what happened here at the board?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to sort of circle back to the initial question that Jess asked and getting a little think tanky, I mean, is there a way? Is the best strategy to do away with this emergent strategy is just to get rid of the U-turn?
That's a good question, Mike, but I don't love that. Especially since they finally put the U-turn in the right place. I don't want them to now, you know how many times the Amazing Race has taken a cool game feature and put it into the game incorrectly and then decided it didn't work and gotten rid of it entirely.
Looking at you head to head.
To me, I have always felt like that the double U-turn is so severe. It really is almost always a death sentence, and not always, but I'd say probably about 80% of the time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say 80% of the time, at least one of the teams that gets U-turned gets out.
I wish that there was a way, I love the strategy of it, but it does seem like it is just so deadly. What if instead of a double U-turn, what if it's just that it's like a double roadblock of, okay, when you get to the roadblock, you don't have to make a tile, you have to make 2 tiles.
Yeah, so
this is something that happens. This is something that happens in other countries, Rob.
Okay.
Amazing Race Norway has this, and I think maybe another iteration of Amazing Race has it. It's called the handicap there. And it's basically, you throw that in their face, and then when they get to the task, their task is a little bit harder. So there's one task that we've seen, like every international edition of Amazing Race has done this task in India, where you have to make bricks out of cow dung, and you have to make like 50 bricks. And when they did this on this international season, which I think was Norway, the handicap was then all of a sudden you had to make 75. Yeah. And so it's like a little bit harder that you have to, your roadblock or your detour task becomes a little bit harder if you're the person with the handicap on you, but it's not having to go and do an entire other task.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if they still want to keep the detour portion of the U-turn in, I think my two simplest solutions would be put it early on in the leg. Like I'm talking like first couple things of when you get out. Because we even saw in this, the more stuff you put after the U-turn, the greater chance you have of someone being able to like, for example, the first U-turn was not a great placement in that regard because it was literally the clue before the pit stop was the U-turn. So any team that got U-turned was pretty much screwed to finish in the back of the pack. And the other option would be retire it like halfway through the season. Like put 2 or 3 U-turns in, but put them in like the first 1 to 5 legs, because I would say putting yourself behind in a group of 8 teams or 9 teams is a lot different than putting yourself behind in a group of 5 or 6 teams.
That's a really good point, Mike. And I've heard, there's been a lot of complaining every time we see one this late. And I was actually glad to see it this episode, because the thing I hate most is the U-turn at the final 4, because that basically affects half the teams at that point. And I feel like that's just too much power. But I do like throwing out your biggest and zestiest twists at the first few legs and then find something else to do later on that can incrementally affect a team, but give them enough opportunity to come back, because otherwise it just becomes a popularity game.
The other part of the double U-turn and burning the board that it does, I would think in most instances, like take the drama out of it, because that the idea is like, okay, 2 teams are going to be U-turned and they're basically going to fight off to see who's going to be eliminated. Whereas burning the board really it was a miracle that Iswar and Aparna even, got back in this thing. Whereas I think in most circumstances, just there being one team that's U-turned, I think that would be the death sentence.
Yeah. What if we did like the old school fast forward? And forgive me, I've been watching a lot of really early Amazing Race lately. What if we had like tons of U-turns? Like everybody gets to use a U-turn once. What if there's a U-turn on each one of the first 4 legs, and you can use it once, and after you use it, you're done?
Interesting. So you're essentially like doing what they tried to do with the yield this season, but also apportion it to like the first third of the season rather than having to save it through halfway through. I could see that. I like, because there is strategy in that. Like now we're essentially done with this idea of like you can only U-turn once in the race because there were only 2 this time, much like the way of the fast forward. That power has sort of gone away. That could be really interesting. And also that it's early on, that means that it's more chaotic. Like I think it'd be very inordinate to have another alliance like the Mine 5 come together and be like, okay, I guess we have to strategically use our U-turns now, because when you panic and you're in that moment, you might just want to throw it up there when you're really struggling in a task.
One last thing. What if we can't tell people who is still behind them in the race? What if that somebody gets double U-turned and then the next team to arrive after the team that receives the double U-turn also is U-turned? Would that break the game, Jess?
Oh, so it's sort of like you can throw the U-turn up, but you don't know who you're U-turning. Like it's the other side of the...
Well, no, you can U-turn a person, but maybe the person that comes after that person is then U-turned.
So you're essentially throwing like tacks in the road behind you to whatever car.
I guess the little Mario Kart. Yeah.
It's like a blind double U-turn instead of a double blind U-turn.
Yeah.
So you could be really screwing one of your alliance mates while you screw somebody else.
Yeah.
Or it could be 2 people you hate and you're just screwing them both.
You hate everybody. Yeah, potentially. Okay.
I don't know. That. So then would it be, if it was 5 teams and they U-turned Aparna and Iswar who finished 3rd, does that mean that the people who arrived in 4th and 5th?
Yeah. No, just the team that comes in 4th.
That'd be a weird little tango between Hung and Chi and Will and James between who steps on that mat.
Yeah.
You first.
Well,
no, you first.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. A lot to think about for Amazing Race 33 someday. All right. Let's go back to planting and let's talk about what's going on, because it turns out that there was a little twist to getting through the planting task, because in one of those accessories, Mike, the Roaming Gnome, you had to see that he had something in his pocket.
Seeds, baby.
Yes.
Well, hopefully no like poppy seeds and sesame seeds were coming in out of Gnome Kalish's little satchel. But yeah, it was all about those seeds. Though I know we got like a little question about this. I can't remember from who. I thought it was pretty lame that the task judge is like, okay, and now you must plant the gnome seeds. Like, I wanted the gnome seeds to be like the lube of the detour, right? Like
Right.
they're greasing the pans. The one thing that the one
That
important thing that they forgot in the task. Like, I wanted it to be that one thing in the detour, but it seemed like they sort of just like steamrolled over that, but being like, oh yeah, and now remember to go to your gnome. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, don't forget.
Well, that's something that we saw in Amazing Race Canada a lot more often, where like half the tasks they'd be like, "Oh, something is wrong with your thing, and we're not going to tell you what it is." And then the other half, it's like, "Well, you need to do that, that, and that, and then you'll be fine."
Your car
And
horn.
yeah, hook up the car horn. It's like,
Exactly.
are they telling you to hook up the car horn or not? And in this case, the seeds are the car horn.
Yes. Well, anytime they're talking about seeds, my ears perked up. But Will and James were talking about the seeds.
Plant the seeds, baby. Let's do it.
Yes.
Wow.
If
2
you- if
years
you-
ago, they predicted Jordan Kalish's meme.
Yes. Listen.
The seeds, baby.
Yeah. Plant the seeds, babe.
The seeds, baby.
Yeah.
Is that like close enough, or do we think that is an entirely different brand than Seeds Baby?
Yeah.
When
That's
are we
close
getting
enough.
merch that says Seeds Baby on it?
I am working on it.
You better
okay?
be. I will
Hang
buy
in
that.
there.
Just get
Hang in
seeds
there.
packets of lemongrass, lime trees, papaya.
Oh God, I'm gonna have
Okay.
to go design this now. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Let's then start to talk about who thinks they can fit the mold. Mike, who thinks they can fit the mold? Is this a common phrase? Is this an idiom?
Yeah, I mean, I think break the mold is more common. So I guess
Yeah.
you have to. It's sort of like, hey, have you ever been whelmed? I know we get overwhelmed and underwhelmed. Like nobody really goes to that other side of the vernacular. So I guess fit the mold. Actually, I have heard the term fit the mold before. Like I can imagine on job interviews, like, let's see if you fit the mold for this company. Though I think, those molds are probably easier to get your hands around or get into than evidently a lot of these tile molds did.
All I know is I'm no fan of mold. Okay, me and mold are not good. Just I'm on mold patrol over here.
Oh yeah. The mold is the much less interesting Anderson Cooper free iteration of that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into this task because it ended up being a real doozy for the teams. We would see Riley working on it and D'Angelo working on it, and boy, just Gary was a real backseat driver from the get-go. And of course, we know he is, of course, a art collector and a connoisseur of all of the finest things. D'Angelo was the pick, though, to do this, and he was not watching the demonstration.
If only there was someone there to show you how to do the task correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't understand how this happened. And I thought for a second that if D'Angelo had indeed been the one to lose this, it really would have been poetic justice in a number of ways. Not just the final destination of the whole steel drums thing in the very first leg, but what have we talked about on the tar pits about D'Angelo Williams time in and time out is like D'Angelo Williams is a man who gets like commonly frustrated and kind of railroads his partner sometimes, where like Gary will say something and D'Angelo will sort of like interrupt it and go on to his own train of thought. And that's sort of what happened here, right? D'Angelo walked over and was like, okay, I saw steps 1 and 2. I sort of assume what 3 through 7 are, and then walked away and didn't see like the key facets of the task. So I do think that while a little repetitive, I do think I could feel Gary's frustration here, understandably so, because I would love to hear, inevitably we will, D'Angelo's side of all this. I'm sure he will have a fantastically entertaining POV behind it, but it really did look like from our perspective that he's like, okay, yeah, and you do this. Okay, I think I can figure the rest out. I'm good to go over and take care of this. I've got this.
Yeah, just I've never seen a partner watching the roadblock that is so frustrated that they're gonna go to sleep. Gary's like, I'm gonna take a nap. I can't watch this anymore.
Yeah, I think that we really rarely get a roadblock where the person not doing the roadblock is more entertaining than the person actually doing it. I think we got to go back to like season 12 where Christina's doing a roadblock and Ron is sharing his snacks with everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of my favorites. But yeah, I think also who's going to make taking a nap entertaining more than Gary Barnage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's kicking back like it's a video game chair after Thanksgiving and he's just going to take a siesta.
Yeah. eventually we're going to see Will and James show up. Will is going to work on it. Hung and Chi are going to show up, and Chi is going to work on it. But Gary is really holding court with all of the partners.
But mainly like the court, like his little speech is like, God, my partner sucks right now.
So stupid.
Like now he has
so
sounding boards to be like, God, look at what this idiot is doing right now. Which, again, is a really fun mirror to the very first leg when D'Angelo was kind of doing the same thing about Gary. Everybody else, like, this is a fantastically entertaining team. And I will say, I think what also, like, this roadblock is one of my favorites in a while. And I think something that really helped it is because none of the teams helped each other. Like, I was waiting on bated breath this episode for like Riley to finish, walk over to Will and be like, oh, it's the grease. You want to grease the sides to be able to do it. But no, it does really seem like, as much as we have this core of three, the teams at least seem outwardly behaving in their own self-interest, which I can imagine, to a lot of our frustration the past few legs, that did not seem to be the case with Sauerkraut in particular. It seems like, at least from an external perspective, we've seen a lot more of teams being like, okay, I got my thing, I'm going to move on, rather than hang back and tell a select number of people what the answer is.
Jess, do you think that was a modification of the rules of the race for this season?
I don't get the sense that the race really adjusts the rules on the fly like that. Like, there are game show rules in place for that kind of thing. But I do think that the sense I get is that occasionally they do get some notice in their clue. Like, you may not assist the other team with this, or this. But there's a lot of stuff you can't enforce. So there could have been, you could certainly have been like, oh, I see what happened. I forgot to grease the thing. You could certainly do that.
Yeah, you do what like Leo and Alana attempted to do, where like they tried to signal that to Haley and Kaylin, but then the other teams overheard them and did the same thing.
Yeah, I think you could do something sort of like that. But the thing, I have heard that the racers got a sense that they didn't want a repeat of Berlin happening, and they kind of gently encouraged people not to do that. But I also think some tasks lend themselves better to helping and some of them don't. Like, you could walk over to the other person and suggest to them that they need to be doing something differently. Or it could be a matter of, I've gotten this and you've watched me do it, or I've gotten this and it's not convenient for me to go out of my way. And you've seen racers actually inconvenience themselves in the service of helping other people. But I think at this point in the race, even if the show told them not to help each other, they're not going to help each other, because you've got so few teams. Yeah. You don't want to risk going out of your way to help another team and then having that put you the 10 seconds back that cost you the race.
Yeah.
And I don't care who it is at this point.
Yeah, especially the roadblock, considering that this was like the last step. Like, I could imagine, the glimpse we got out of it this leg is like Hung and Chi and Will and James were very cordial with each other at the detour. Like, Hung and Chi being like, oh yeah, it's over there. Like, they were having very like casual chit chat during the detour. But I would say that maybe once it came closer to the pit stop and elimination was staring them down the face, they were more so like, okay, I'm just going to, put my blinders up and move on. So that way I know I'll check in, not in fifth place.
Okay, so Riley is going to be the first person to realize that he's got to grease the pan before he ends up going through it. He gets through it. He goes off to do the tile puzzle. Is this the first time we get the slide puzzle on The Amazing Race? Usually a Survivor staple.
Nope. It is not. It is at least goes as far back as season 27 on the first leg there in Rio de Janeiro. And there was a rare field elimination by Phil because the TMZ girls could not figure out the slide puzzle.
Yes. 3x3 slide puzzle is very easy, though.
Yeah, 3x3 is much easier than whatever they had to do.
Ask Tony Blachos. He would disagree.
No, that was more than 3x3.
I don't know. I thought it was 3x3 is what he did in Cagayan.
I think it was, I do believe it was more. I think it was like the whole Survivor logo. And I think that he was, unless I'm getting it confused with Winners at War, but I think that 3x3 is pretty basic.
Yeah, well, that's on Netflix now, so we could all go check it out.
We'll go check that out.
I agree, though. 3x3 is the dentist's office toy, right? It's like you just sort of shuffle it around. So even if like you are not the best with the puzzle, you'll be able to. And I also do wonder off screen, because it was clear that like they had to leave one specific tile left to fill in as their last piece. So like, did they have to arrange the other tiles in a specific order? Because the other thing about slide puzzles, and this was experienced in a challenge in Survivor South Africa, if you don't put the tiles in a specific order in a certain slide puzzle, it becomes unsolvable. So I can imagine they were given a lot of guidance as to like what goes where, and then you can figure it out from there.
Okay. Will ends up being the person who ends up acing this the quickest. That Mike, he is good at arts and crafts.
Yeah, I mean, evidently, I really like Will and James, but Will in particular has proven to be a really fun personality. Like this, when he gets the roadblock clue, he says that like he doesn't fit any mold, but he'll fit this mold. There's a lot of great Will sass in this episode, in my opinion. I think he had a very good time between like he got to come back to his garden after ditching it in middle school, and finally, and treating it so badly that sort of came back around, and then he said his garden died because he got busy. I was like, whoa.
I love it when people
plant those
try
seeds,
to.
baby.
Yeah.
I love it when people try to tie whatever task they're doing back to something in their life. Like they're trying to Slumdog Millionaire every single task on the race. And sometimes those things fit a little bit better than others. And I really felt like this was like just shy of one time I walked past a garden, so I should be okay at this task.
Well, yeah, that's the equivalent of, right, Leo played baseball in middle school, therefore he should be good at the carnival games. I say anything you do in middle school usually does not translate to your adult life.
Yeah, I feel like anything you do in middle school, like it's wiped clean of your record, and nobody should be able to reference it again, including you.
Thank God. Okay, so we're gonna see Riley and Madison. They're gonna get to the mat first. Phil had a greeting for them. He said, "Well, you've got dust on your nose, and your beards are longer." But you made it through.
Yeah, I thought, was Phil greeting Riley Madison or Santa Claus in anticipation for the holiday?
Yeah, you're going to Norway.
Well, and this is this is the third leg that they've won. I'm pretty sure they've won 3 trips so far in this race.
Okay, they're ready to go. Will and James are going to come in second. James just always wanted to come to Cambodia. Great day.
I'm with him on that. Like I loved Will and James this episode just because it was such them being there in Cambodia and being on The Amazing Race to boot. Like that was just such a gift for them, and you could tell that they really were relishing every second of it, and everything went right for them. Like they were never in trouble. They were never in danger of getting eliminated. They just got to have a fun day doing Amazing Race things in a country that was on their bucket list. Like I would hope that if I was ever on The Amazing Race, which we all know that's not something I ever want to do, but if I was, I would hope this is the kind of leg that I would have at least once. Going someplace that I would die to go to and getting to just do fun things and be on the show. It's great.
Not to mention that Will jumped them up. They came to the roadblock in 4th place and they left in 2nd place.
Yeah.
So as much as we talk about like D'Angelo having a huge fall, Will really jumped them up considerably from where they were going into that.
Arts and crafts, baby.
Struggle. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. But now Iswar and Aparna left for dead. They get through their other half of the detour. Aparna really came to life in this episode, Jess. That you're saying
Where
about
was
how
this?
Yeah, I hate them right now. I hate their guts.
Oh, I love it. It sort of is like the FU Brad Culpepper energy, right? Of like, now I'm like on the brink of elimination, like no holds barred. Let me just dig into this person.
Jess, this was Providence Aparna.
Yeah.
Oh, man. 5 people that get
Berkeley Aparna.
Yeah.
That is a deep cut, Rob.
Yeah.
I will say there were 2 things that I think maybe made this entire episode. And actually, maybe this is like 1.5 things now that I'm thinking about it, because if this episode had been structured such that Aparna and Ishwar never see the other teams again, like they get U-turned and then they rock up to the mat well after everybody else has checked in.
If they're Haley and Kaylin, essentially.
Yeah, if they're Haley and Kaylin, this is like a D- episode of Amazing Race, and we're not really excited to talk about it. But the fact that they showed up and were clearly still in it due to so many of the teams not figuring out what they had to be doing. And then the fact that Aparna came into that encounter at an 11, that just made the entire episode exciting again. And this has been the team where there's always that one team where you're talking about who's still in the race, and there's one team you're like, I know there's 5 teams left, but who is that 5th team?
Yeah, they're definitively the team Lolo season 32 up to this point.
Yes, they are. And for the life of me, like they've never gotten a really standout moment. Like they've gotten a few things where they're like, well, we're engineers, so we should be pretty good at this task that is peripherally related to engineering and not even the kind you do. But that's the most entertaining they've ever been until this moment. And I wish that they had been like this, and maybe they were, and it just wasn't relevant, but I wish they'd been like this all season.
I hope Aparna is like this on the exit interview tomorrow.
Oh,
yeah,
no
like I
kidding.
wonder if rewatching this has like hopefully reinvigorated that spiciness. Because granted, was it a little unfounded from an objective perspective? Absolutely, right? Because like them saying like you're so dumb for U-turning us. We talked through earlier how I think from a logical perspective where they were coming from, it made sense. But it didn't make it any less entertaining to just have her specifically. Like, I don't know if she was purposely trying to psych out D'Angelo during the roadblock by talking specifically to him. The fun thing is, so from a rule in the roadblock, you can't communicate with your partner really during the roadblock. Doesn't necessarily, it's not against the rules to have you talk to somebody else's partner.
Yeah. Yes, I was wondering, is this emergent gameplay in The Amazing Race, or has this been done before in the past where that rather than, trying to like cheer on your partner, could you taunt another person while they're trying to complete the task?
I don't think there's anything against the rules about that, but I do feel like you might get spoken to.
Well, because the only thing that I can really remember of this was not really during a roadblock, but it was during the infamous water slide to the pit stop in season 15 when like the Globetrotters were doing so much trash talk to Mika and Kanan, knowing that like because she was so afraid of water slides, they just kept poking that bear so they could get ahead of her.
Yeah, that didn't make the greatest television, did it? I mean, it did and it didn't. I felt a little icky about it.
Yeah. I just think that you like what's it called, Mike, where you go to like to the county fair and there's that guy that's like
dunk tank. Yeah,
the dunk tank guy who's just like, come on, what, you can't hit this, idiot.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially doing like a psych out from the movie Basketball, right? Of like, how can you really mess up the person as much? But luckily, Aparna wasn't like pretending to cut off her own finger or said that anyone was sleeping with a guy named Squeak. But yeah, it's very clear at this point. I do wonder if there was some 4D chess going on with Aparna of like, this is going to be karma for D'Angelo. I'm just going to talk non-stop and just get in his ear the entire time so he can't concentrate on his task. Yeah.
Oh, so great. I loved it. Eventually, Chi is going to get through it. And then it looked like at one point, Iswar, Jess, that he figured out that you need to grease the pan.
Yeah, he figured it out, but then I'm not sure what exactly happened. It really felt like you didn't get anything of what happened between Chi getting it and Iswar going to the slide puzzle. Like, was D'Angelo just like a savant at the slide puzzle? Like, we never saw him do it.
Yeah.
What I think happened is that I don't think that Iswar ever got down how to make the tile. So I think that he got down the part about how to like, oh, I have to grease the pan. Like he picked that up way faster than D'Angelo did. And then by the time that D'Angelo had gone, he mastered making the tile. He just couldn't get it to unstick from whatever you cook it on.
So what you're saying is if they put their efforts together, it would have been the perfect roadblock competitor where they had both sides of the equation.
Yeah, I just think that, and we'll find out tomorrow, but I just think that Iswar never nailed down how to make the tile right. It seemed like that he like he put the color in the wrong place, that he just was not able to get that part down.
I did like also that element of like the color by numbers part where you had to put the paint in the very specific parts of the design. I know that obviously the crux of it came down to greasing the pan beforehand, but I don't know. Again, I'm a pleb, but I was very intrigued by the process of in which tiles are made. It took me back to our Tough as Nails days from earlier this year of like, all you need to do is just sprinkle some cement on and then put it under the giant compression of these giant, giant compress, and then you're able to create a tile.
Yes, don't you feel like that this would have, we could have got more out of this if Phil could have given us like 20-25 minutes on how tiles are made?
I would have
art of creating crafting tile.
I would have been 110% here for that, Rob.
Yeah, would have been
Remember
great.
15 years ago when we did a podcast with Phil about Tough as Nails?
Yeah. Maybe again one day. Who knows? All right. So ultimately, epic fake out attempt on the part of the Amazing Race as we are trying to set up this race to the mat. They went for it, Mike. They didn't get me, but they went for it. They tried really hard to sell you. Gary and D'Angelo were not going to get there in fourth place.
Yeah, because they were distracted by the monks cutting down the tree, which has to be the weirdest. Like, that would supersede, I think, what we talked about a couple of weeks ago of Jen from Keisha and Jen having to go to the bathroom before the pit stop. Like, if Gary and D'Angelo were truly eliminated for that reason, that would be the most bonkers reason any team has ever been eliminated from the Amazing Race of, oh yeah, a bunch of monks were blocking the road because they had a bulldozer to take down a tree that was sticking out.
Yeah. Couldn't get past it. A literal roadblock, Jess.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't get more literal than that.
Well, now I wonder, I mean, monks do dress in orange. Do they also like moonlight as construction workers?
Yeah.
Look, when you're a monk, you have to learn how to do a lot of things.
You have to wear a lot of different hats.
But one
Jess,
robe.
Yes. Can you estimate how far behind Gary and D'Angelo, Eastwar and Aparna ultimately were? They were not at the mat together.
They were not at the mat together. I think when you ask them, because, that's always like when you're doing an exit interview, there's like the two questions you start with. What happened, guys? And how far behind do you think you were?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to say,
like, oh, we were not even close. Like, we were like 5 hours behind.
Yeah. Either that or they say, I'm pretty sure it was just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those instances where I think it was not that long, but it was long enough that you never saw them like running it out in a foot race. So that could be 10 minutes. That could be 20 minutes. I don't think it was terribly longer than that because you saw them together at the penultimate stop on the race. So I'm going to say they're going to tell you about between 10 and 20 minutes.
Okay. Anything else that we want to say about the episode before we get to some questions?
No, I mean, I will say, again, Eastwar and Aparna really brought it in their final leg here. And I love, especially like what Sasha was talking about on the tar pits of what they brought in terms of representation. I will admit, I think of these top 5 teams, they were probably the least entertaining going into this episode. So I can't say like, I'll be completely candid. If it was them or Gary and D'Angelo, I would rather Gary and D'Angelo stay in personally. But that being said, they seem like a very sweet, very funny pair of people. I'm glad we got to see a bit more of their personality at the end here. So, and I'm intrigued to find out more about them as well. Because another great thing about Exit Press is it brings out, their unedited personalities in a manner of speaking. And I can imagine, given what we saw of Aparna, especially at the latter part of this leg, they're going to have a lot to say without like the filter of Amazing Race exhaustion on them.
All right, let's get into some of your questions here tonight as we discuss episode 10 of The Amazing Race. 2 weeks from tonight, we will learn the winner of The Amazing Race 32. Why don't we start things off with Jordan, who says, name a more iconic FU, Aparna or Candace Cody? Mike, you want to field this one?
Oh, I mean, this is tough. I mean, of course, there's the Mandela effect that Candace Cody didn't technically say F you, Brad Culpepper. That was indeed Marissa Peterson, but Candace did flip her off. I mean, I don't think Aparna ever said F you. She said things like, I can't even look at you guys right now. We'll get you, Gary. I might give it to Aparna if only because that is like shades of the Wicked Witch, which delights me to no end.
Yes, I also like that she was like, oh yeah, why don't you just, keep messing up for another 5 hours? Yeah,
she was feisty. I really loved the sass level, and I wish that if she was like this the whole time and we didn't get it, I'm gonna be so mad.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a question that is from Allie, who says, what is the best strategy? You turn a strong team to get out of threat, or you turn the weakest team to give yourself a cushion? Jess, is there a hard and fast rule on this?
Well, the former almost never works out. Like the 20% of the time that we see people bounce back from a U-turn, that's people trying to get a strong team out. And it's pretty much, you have to be an opportunist about it. The only time that you should U-turn a strong team is if you know they're already in last place, because they might come back in a future leg and this could be their one bad leg. So it behooves you to make this bad leg worse for them so that they're gone. But pretty much all you want to do is make sure that you are not the person coming in last place, because really the only leg where you don't care about the only leg where you should care about your placement is really the last one. The rest of the time, just don't be last. And so the U-turn is really your opportunity to make sure you're not last. And that's why you see people not really thinking too hard about saying we choose not to U-turn, because they know they're not going to be last this leg. They got a comfortable lead. And unless like the key times to U-turn someone is if someone who would otherwise be very good at the race is very far back, make sure they're gone. If you yourself are about to be eliminated, if somebody is not further behind you, they can be gone. If somebody is a fair bit behind you and there's somebody you personally don't like, then you turn them. But those are your case studies.
And to prove Jess's point that the former almost never works, look to earlier this season when Will and James said, Leo and Alana are a strong team. I shall U-turn today. And look what happened. Like Jess said, it almost never works because the caveat of U-turning a strong team is because they're a strong team. They're almost always going to bounce back or U-turn a team directly behind them just to like get them out and keep themselves in.
Okay, let's take a question that is from Med, who says, I know they're in an alliance, but why do the volleyball bros not see Will and James as their biggest threat? I think that they wasted an opportunity to get them out. For whatever reason, I feel like that teams feel like on the Amazing Race, hey, let's just get to the final three.
Yeah, so
let's just get to the final three and we'll duke it out.
Checking out the secret scenes, that is very much the Volley Bros attitude. And they were talking some more about Gary and D'Angelo, and they said, like, one of the reasons why we're not fans of Gary and D'Angelo's playing style is because we feel like they want to create the best playing field for them to win at the end. They care about the win. We just want to get to the final three and then see what happens. And you hit the nail on the head, Rob. I think it just comes down to like a difference of philosophy about the game. And I think to Med's, I think Med sort of answers his own question with his first 5 words there. Like the reason why the Volley Bros don't see Will and James as their biggest threat is because they feel like they can mutually benefit from each other and help each other out. So they don't necessarily see that idea of like, well, they're a threat to win. More so like, we'll get to the end, and if they win, cool. If we win, even cooler.
Yeah, they're used to not winning anything, Jess.
Yeah, even more gnarly.
That's not why they're here, I think. And I can see
you
that
always fall
philosophy.
back on Dad's cookie business.
Now that they know how to make chantilly cream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know where I was going with this. You two took it in a different direction.
Sorry about that.
Blame the cookie restaurant.
We U-turned you. But for teams that have this philosophy, Jess, is this the right way that teams should approach the Amazing Race?
Well, I think it's hard to say that you could go on this show and 100% feel like I'm going to do everything it takes to win, because it is the real prize is the friends you make along the way, right?
So true.
So basically, I think you are in this amazing once in a lifetime experience. And I think it would be really hard to have your head so far in the game that all you're doing, like every move you make at every point, is just to further your own goals to get $1 million. And I think there's very few people that have done it. I think the only person that might have arguably been in that groove the whole time is Boston Rob, because that's the kind of person he is. But I think you're thinking a lot about not just, how much further you can get and how much more of this you can enjoy. I think the $1 million at a certain point, you kind of forget it's there. Mm-hmm. You are thinking more about like, how am I going to prolong my own enjoyment of this? And what is the scenario that I want to see happen? And I think that's where you get into this final three thinking of, I want the people I like best to be in the final three. I don't think there's any kind of iron sharpens iron thing going on here, or even a thought about who I want to see win. It's really, I want to get to the finals and I want my friends to come to the finals with me.
Okay, let's take this question. This is from Abby. Wasn't the pit stop for this leg the temple that they went to at the start of Survivor Cambodia? And they did a slide puzzle. This was a Survivor leg. Did they start off Survivor Cambodia at a temple, or did they went to a reward challenge at a temple?
There was the Chinese food challenge.
No, or did they walk through it? Did they walk through a temple?
They may have walked through a temple, but they made a visit to a temple at the final 7, and that was not. That was Angkor Wat. Was the name?
Was
of that
it Angkor
temple.
Wat? I thought that. I was trying to figure out which temple. This is not on Wikipedia, but Angkor Wat is the really, really famous one, and I'm pretty sure that Survivor. they went to, maybe they did go to Angkor Wat like right at dawn or something.
Yeah,
But there was one.
they had an overnight trip at Angkor Wat.
There was one where they had like they had to go to a temple and eat Chinese food, and we're like, why are you eating Chinese food in Cambodia? And they were in a temple then, and I was trying to figure out if that was this Angkor Thom or if it was it could have been like Bayon is another, like it was the name of the tribe, and then they went to the actual Bayon location.
Yeah.
I do not know. I would like somebody to
I
fact
believe that I think that they did do like a walkthrough, like they all traveled together. They were voted in. And I think that maybe they did do like a walkthrough of a temple before they went to location because they had so much extra time between when they were out there. I think so.
Don't make me go and rewatch this entire season.
No, we could text Steven.
That's right. We know.
I'm checking. So according to Inside Survivor, which has a really fun series of articles called Survivor Wanderlust, where they actually go over all the locations that they've been to. They did indeed go to Angkor Wat for both the beginning as they walked in the temple, and then when Keith Spencer and Wentworth went back. So yeah, Angkor Wat it is.
All right.
But did he list where the challenge was, where they got to spend the night in the temple?
Yeah, that was Angkor Wat as well.
That was also Angkor Wat. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is from Betsy, who says, can the watchdog teammate not offer the direction to watch the example? That is correct.
That is correct. That's against the rules.
Basically,
you will get a penalty.
Anything that will instruct someone as to do the challenge is against the rules. Even if it's like, hey, look over there. That is against the rules. They are very much against the non-participating team member instructing really anyone whatsoever. And as Jess points out, we know that tracks at least all the way back to Amazing Race 25, though maybe it was more of an unwritten rule after those earlier seasons when teammates were just helping each other out of the wazoo.
Yes, what's the penalty that we're looking at? Is it 30 minutes? Is it more severe?
I think it was 30 minutes in season 27.
Then Gary should have done it. He should have done it instead of taking the nap.
I don't think this is not an Amazing Race iteration that really rewards people for taking penalties and has not done so in a really long time. Whereas, that might fly on Amazing Race Canada.
Plus, Rob, does Gary really want it to come back onto him as being the reason why they lost this game is because they took the 30-minute penalty? Like, he could very easily now have something over D'Angelo of like, hey, I didn't get us eliminated. If he does that, he becomes culpable as well.
Mike, could Gary potentially just break into like a Summer Lovin' or something and then just like put a little earworm and you're like, why is he singing a song from Greece?
Yeah, I think if he tapped out Morse code that said, hey, look at what the guy's doing, maybe that would be another great way to really get in his head.
It was something really innocuous in 27 when they did that. And it was like almost, she didn't even think twice about saying it. So I would say that you would have to be really, really stealthy.
Well, I'd love to get to Athens sometime.
Well, like even like in 30, it was just like, hey, look at the letters, and that earned them a penalty. With the basketball guys early on. So again, they draw a really thick line of what constitutes helping someone and what doesn't.
Okay. Let's take another question from Med. Why don't they let their teams book their flights anymore? Jess, you want to answer this in gift form or?
I answered it in gift form already.
Okay.
It was dollar bills, y'all.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
Too expensive.
Okay. All right. Of course, you could check out Amazing Race on Pluto TV if you want to see teams book their own plane tickets.
Yeah, and when teams instructing each other during roadblocks as well as the time gone by.
Yeah, and you can live in a world where there's always there's a subsequent season of Amazing Race coming up, and the world is not so on fire that they can't film it.
That's very true, actually.
Okay. All right. Steven has a question. Would the right move for Gary and D'Angelo have been to yield the Beard Bros? They're a much stronger team than Iswar and Aparna, and it's likely that the Beards turn around and yield Iswar and Aparna. I get the NFL's logic. Boy, Mike, wouldn't that have been great television if Gary and D'Angelo said, we choose to U-turn Riley and Madison? Like, what?
Yeah, like, we're right here. I mean,
we're right here. How could you do this?
Sorry, Steven. No, this is a terrible move if they did this, because to your point, Riley Madison go, okay, I'm going to U-turn eastward in Aparna, so I'm guaranteed 4th place. See you at the roadblock, gentlemen. Like, you are guaranteed that they are going to not only stay in the race, but also be mad at you for U-turning them.
But what could they do?
Next leg, they have shown a propensity to be able to block people out of information. I think they could sure have a piece of ammo in their pocket
you're
now.
out of the Mine 5. Guess what? They're out of the Mine 5 anyway.
They know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do see, like, you then free them up to just U-turn somebody that they already know is behind them. It doesn't make any sense. But I do like the idea, and I've always found it entertaining when you have teams like trying to elbow each other out of the way to the U-turn board so they can U-turn each other. That makes really fun television, and we don't get a lot of that, and I'm sure someone's going to come at me and say that's because they moved the U-turn to the place where it belongs. But honestly, we know that this is a very cordial season despite all this talk about alliances because you didn't get any of that.
Let's check out the draft board after tonight. And we lost Iswar and Aparna. They were part of Jess's team. Look at this draft that Mike had. If you remember when we did our draft podcast, Mike had the 1st pick overall and the 5th pick, but he only got the pick 2. But he's looking pretty good with Riley and Madison and Will and James with another 1 and 2 finish. Jess is in there with Hung and Chi. And all I have left is Gary and D'Angelo. And I am not feeling too great about that.
I don't know. I mean, again, who knows? I don't think these 3 teams, to Jess's point earlier, are going to necessarily work together to box them out next leg. Other teams have been able to sneak their way into the final 3 and do really well in the final leg. I still will put forward what I said last week, that I think any of these 4 teams can win, especially they've all finished in first in at least one leg. I mean, I think the unfortunate thing from just a gender breakdown, and I even talked about this in our preseason podcast, is I did feel like this was a very male heavy season in terms of not only there being 5 male teams, but like a good majority of them being strong. And the fact that they make up 3 out of the final 4 teams, I think proves that.
Yeah. This is something we talked about the other day with Eliza. I haven't heard anybody talk about this. I mean, do we have any? It seems like that the women on this season have struggled more with just getting to the tasks as opposed to actually doing the tasks. Is that a common theme in the Amazing Race of why women have struggled on the women teams?
Well, I think anytime you hear about a cab driver being singularly terrible, I would say probably 75% of the time it is an all-female team, and I don't know why this is. I honestly don't know if it's some kind of internalized thing where a cab driver won't listen to a woman, like especially in certain countries where that kind of chauvinistic mindset is more prevalent, or it could also be the way that women are socialized, like not to speak up and not to be assertive about where they're going. And, even in a race for $1 million, you still have this pressure on you to be perceived as polite. And there is I don't know what the causes behind it are. We can only speculate, but I do notice that transportation difficulty that is not your fault has been the downfall of many female teams in the recent seasons, especially.
Yeah, I was thinking about this we had a question the other day on the feedback show that we didn't end up getting to that was asking this same question. And I wonder, because a lot of times it's like these loser cab drivers that end up getting the people. It's not like that the other,
no
like
spider, that's for sure.
It's not like Gary and D'Angelo actually knew how to get to a place, but, they have a better cab driver than, say, Michelle and Victoria could have had. Is it possible that in some of these countries that the cab drivers themselves are saying like, okay, let me pick up these guys as opposed to these women for whatever reason, as opposed to maybe they're thinking like, oh, okay, I'm going to get tipped better or some reason that the cab driver tends to pick the better cab drivers pick up men more than they pick up women?
I was thinking about this in terms of like last season when they were in Dubai and there were different types of cabs that you could get in, whether you were male or female. And I wondered if I think there had been some speculation that may have had an effect on who got where when. And I don't think that cab drivers necessarily have the kind of agency to pick up one team over another team. I think it's really luck of the draw, but at a certain point, there does factor in, like, you might get a bad cab driver, and some teams might immediately jettison that cab driver and get a different one, or they might be able to take a little bit more control over where he's going and why and how. And I think maybe people that are socialized to speak up for themselves a little bit more forcefully might have an easier time getting the cab driver to do what they want. And the cab driver conversely might be more receptive to getting direction from somebody that they perceive to be their equal on some subconscious level. That's my biggest theory on it. I don't think the cab drivers themselves look at them and be like, I want that team. I want that team.
Yeah, because I think you also need to remember the invisible half of the team, which are the two other people involved in the camera person and the sound person, who also may be of different genders too. So it's not like you're necessarily pulling over and picking up 4 women or 4 men. Mike. There's going to be some sort of mixture there. So I think I agree that I think it's a very complicated issue, and I think you can't help but talk about it just because of the pattern that emerged, particularly in this season, between Kelly and Levon and Haley and Kaylin several times being screwed over by cab drivers. You have to wonder if it is sort of societally influenced. But I like a lot of what Jess is talking about just the proclivity to speak up and how some people might respond to like a woman telling you you're lost versus a man telling you you're lost, and how you might respond to that and pursue, a course of action from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think something interesting that happens in some of these locations is there's like a secret cabal of cab drivers. I think one of my favorite things was when they were in Panama City and all the cab drivers were on the phone to each other being like, well, where are you taking them? Oh, I'll take them there. And I think that's something I'd like to see happen more often, because I think it's more of an equalizer. And I think we don't want getting into the wrong cab to be the reason so many teams go out.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about it, is you would think in this day and age with the advent of smartphones and GPS that would be the equalizer, right? It's like you don't need to worry about getting lost because it's literally there on the phone. But as was proven with Kelly and Levon, things can still happen, like forgetting a phone charger that can still, have them start back from square one in the good old days where you didn't have that to navigate with.
Yeah, and I don't mind it if it's their self-navigating that gets them somewhere. I just hate it when it's someone else's fault. And to that point, I think we did have some feedback last week where they suggested maybe they should have them take more public transportation or have them do walkable things more, so that you're not just getting in the back of a car. And I recognize there's only a certain amount of that you can do with your camera crew in tow, to your point, Mike, but I would really like to see a lot more of that, because if a team's going to get out for a navigation issue, I want it to be their navigation issue.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about what else is coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast. Oh, Sequester debuted this week, Sequester season 4. And I got the chance to talk about the premiere with Taron Armstrong. And if you haven't checked it out, it was a lot of fun. Sequester is a reality game, which is now in its 4th season. I know a lot of people saw the Sequester minis that were happening for much of the lockdown. This is Sequester in person, featuring Sharina Skui from Survivor Cambodia herself.
She is the Angkor Wat Temple.
Yes. Also, our own Brent Wolgamott is a cast member. After you check it out at sequesteraccess.com, check out my recap with Taron Armstrong. Taron is going to be back on Monday nights, recapping all of Sequester season 4. That was very good.
And I think for those that are into a lot of the strategy talk that we're bringing about with Amazing Race, that is essentially all that strategic talk on steroids. Every round is different. Alliances are made and broken within like instance. It really is, especially like following Big Brother, and particularly this Big Brother season. It really is like the hyper strategic game that game lovers are truly obsessed with.
All right. Over on News AF, we talked about last week. We talked about the appearance of the Utah Monolith. This week, we talked about the sudden disappearance of the Utah Monolith and what the explanation is of where it went, plus more monoliths popping up in Romania. Where else will the next monolith show up?
Could these be pit stops on the alien Amazing Race?
They could be. For all of your monolith news, check out News AF. Oh, talking with T-Bird, Cindy Hall. Speaking of self-driving, Cindy Hall joined us on the latest Talking with T-Bird, and what a delight Cindy Hall was. I said this was one of my favorite Talking with T-Birds, and I did not have like super high expectations for Cindy Hall, but I thought that she was great. T-Bird was in love with Cindy Hall. She was fangirling over Cindy Hall. She has a lot of great stories, a lot of animal information as
Rob,
well.
Did you ask her if zebras are the smelliest animal?
I actually did find out
good,
in the latest Talking with T-Bird with Cindy Hall. It was a really
Does
good
she
one.
still drive the car? That's
You'll
what I wanna know.
you'll find out.
That's
You'll find
that's
out.
the biggest mystery. If she's
The
still
answer-
watching her fellow finalists through the sunroof.
Yeah, find out what she thought about Danny Boatwright on Winners at War and more on Talking with T-Bird. And then tomorrow, back-to-back Bloom, as tomorrow we will be back with more Outwit, Outplay, Outlist. And Mike, talk us through, what are we talking about tomorrow?
It's a topic that I know Jess loves so much. Through 40 seasons of Survivor, this sun's gonna get in your eyes, and through various years, we have seen hats take many forms on the heads of hundreds of Survivor castaways. Tomorrow, Rob, you, me, and the great Chantel Francis are going to get together to rank and rate some of the most noticeable hats, for good or for bad, across 40 seasons of Survivor. Certainly to include these three lovely figures and many, many more.
Yes. Mike, what is the genealogy of noticeable hats? Why is noticeable the adjective?
So it's from a game we did on the B&B that I believe it was called like Lesu, Levu, or Luzon. Speaking of other Survivor seasons that are on Netflix. And I said they're like, oh, two of these tribes have members on it who have noticeable hats. And I don't know where that particular piece of vernacular came from in my weird brain, but it was something that we fixated on so much that it has now become like a part of our typical B&B terminology, and if from Jess can speak firsthand, definitely beyond. So somehow noticeable hats has made its way into that lexicon, and it's going to make its way onto the podcast title here.
Yeah, do we need B&B merch that's a hat that says noticeable?
Oh, that's amazing.
I think we just need a shirt that says noticeable shirt.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
All right. Can't wait. Tomorrow, Outwit, Outplay, Outlist with Mike Bloom and Chantel Francis. Okay. Then, look at this. The American Ninja Warrior podcast is back. Taryn and Lita will wrap up season 12 of American Ninja Warrior in our Wrap-Ups feed. And then, first up, Puya Zambakili is back to talk more 90 Day Fiance with 90 Day Fiance the other way, but we had a big exclusive announcement during our patron cast the other night that 90 Day Fiance regular season 8 is going to be back on Sunday night, and Puya is allowing me to sleep on his podcast couch as I will join him to cover this upcoming season of 90 Day Fiance. So look for that. We'll be dropping those in the main podcast feed. Puya and I will break down the new season of 90 Day Fiance kicking off on TLC as Puya continues to cover 90 Day Fiance the other way. In the 90 Day
Fiance. Look at you getting romantic here, Rob, talking about these dating couples and their trials and tribulations.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've always wanted to cover it. We talked about it on Renap. I've dabbled a little bit myself, but I want to get more into the 90 Day Fiance. So look for that. That'll be on Monday when I talk about 90 Day Fiance season 8 premiere. And
you're going to keep with the international aspect that Amazing Race is bringing in. So I think it really does connect, surprisingly so.
Yeah, excited about that. Of course, the Bachelorette. See what's going on over there as we see Tayshia. She's getting ready she's going on dates. She's got like a big princess dress on. See what Haley and Amy have to say about everything that's going on there. Bachelorette wrap-up.
I was just watching it with Angela, and some guy stripped down to his nudes as he was doing some.
Why? Yeah, why was he nude?
I didn't get the context. I didn't need to.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's really taking like the Bachelorette competitions to another level of like, all right, well, everyone just strip down today. Someone's getting a rose, somebody's not. Let's see Let's see
Leave
what's
it to
happening.
you to determine the criteria there.
Yeah. Okay. Then The Masked Singer is coming close to an end. It's down to 6 on The Masked Singer. Hear what Puya and Mike's B&B co-host Liana have to say about the final 6 of The Masked Singer, also airing tonight on television. And then over the weekend, I'm going to get to catch up with Allie Lasher and Brian Cohen, and we're going to talk about the upcoming season of The Challenge, everything you need to know to get ready to watch a season of The Challenge. Now, are either of you challenge people?
I'm a big challenge head. I'm so excited by the title of this episode, getting down to the nitty gritty, because it reminded me of Nelson's misappropriated quote of saying how things are getting down to the needy greedy, which you seem to believe was the proper phrase.
Yeah.
Seems more appropriate given everything I know about The Challenge.
Yeah. Okay. We will talk about The Challenge as we get ready. Amazing Race veteran Natalie Anderson will be part of The Challenge coming up. And then over the weekend, get into it's time for another round of Rob and Akiva Need a Podcast. Rob and Akiva Need a PR firm. Myself, Akiva Winokur, and Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz are going to be punching up a bunch of things that are a little long in the tooth. People, customs, food items. We're talking about it all. I actually recorded that one today. It's a lot of fun. We're going to be dropping that one a little bit of a heads up one day early. Look for that Friday night special Rob and Akiva Need a Podcast coming this week. And then if you missed it over the weekend, we caught up with Eliza Orleans on the Tar Pit, including our exit interview with Kaylin and Haley. Plus, then Sasha Joseph stopped by. We played Indian Price is Right and had a lot of fun on the Tar Pit this past week.
Yeah, and I believe congratulations to Eliza, who at the time of recording this, it's a couple of hours old, but I believe she had a very successful campaign event featuring many Amazing Race alumni, including 3 teams from this season.
Yeah, and don't forget, we'll be back this weekend for another round of the Tar Pit. Send in your questions, Amazing Race at robhasawebsite.com. Of course, hey, it's the start of another month. Great time to jump in and become a patron of Rob Has a Podcast. Help support all of this podcasting that goes on. Become a part of our patron community over at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Last night I did I did 4 hours of calls with the patrons on our monthly patron cast. Over the weekend, we'll be playing another round of Patron Family Feud. You can be a part of everything that's going on. Get our patron-only podcast feed and everything we have going on in our patron community at robhasawebsite.com/patron. All right. Of course, you can follow us on social media as well at Rob Has a Podcast on Twitter and on Instagram. And then you can check us out at RHAP Graham. All right. Great job with everything there. Scott. Okay. Jess, what's next for you?
What's next for me is the great Mike Bloom and I, this gentleman right here, are going to talk about Star Trek.
So great.
We do Star Trek Discovery recaps over the weekend. New episodes drop on Thursday of the show, and we're usually talking on Saturdays, all things Star Trek Discovery. It's really been a wonderful season. We're having a very good time talking about it.
Okay.
And then I know we have a secret project, but I don't think we're telling people what it is yet, Rob.
Not yet. But Jess and I will be podcasting some more together about something later this month.
Ooh.
It's a secret.
Yeah. There you go. How about that, Mike?
I'm not even in the
We'll
alliance.
tell you after the show.
I don't know what the secret is.
Yeah. All right. Mike, what's next for you?
Well, I'm an open book with my plugs, Rob. So in addition to the stuff that Jess is plugging, our great Star Trek Discovery coverage, of course, I'm going down the hatch with Josh Wigler every week covering Lost. But another big Survivor podcast, Rob, that was not included in the slide of things is you and me and the great Shannon Gus are going to get together because Survivor being brought to Netflix has brought in a huge influx of new fans. And the question has come up, what seasons should be introduced to new fans? So the three of us are going to talk to both the advent of Survivor on Netflix, what it does for the show. Is there a proper order to introduce seasons to people? If so, what should the order be? We're going to have a huge discussion around the process behind introducing Survivor to this bolstering community of new people, both celebrities and plebs who are looking to get more involved with the show after being so hooked on Heroes versus Villains and Cagayan. So that's going to be a lot of fun getting into all of that with regards to maybe how Survivor fans can spend their next, portion of time trying to give out new seasons to watch for those that are looking to get on board with more stuff.
Yeah, I'm still workshopping the name for that one. I think I wanted to like help. I just watched Survivor for the first time.
So like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
Yeah, I don't know. We're
Exclamation
workshopping
title.
it. Like, what do I do? 911. Yeah.
I mean, listen, we could rebrand ourselves to Survivor 911, so we could just sort of be like the college of like, here's my Survivor emergency, help me.
Yeah. Okay. Survivor emergency. So, all right, that's gonna be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah,
right.
I'm very excited for that. Excited to talk some more Survivor stuff, both in the silly variety and looking forward. And who knows, maybe we have some more brain steals in the hopper as well coming down the pike.
Yeah. The one that I want to do the most right now, Brand Steel Nintendo.
Okay, listen, I'm a big Nintendo fan, so I am, for lack of a better term, game.
Okay. All right. So, Mike, great job. Anything else you want to mention?
No, so I mean, tomorrow, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I'll have my interview with Aparna and Iswar up, so be sure to check that out at parade.com. But I put it all out there at a Mike Bloom type on Twitter.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. We've got plenty more to come this week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Rob has a website.com/iTunes, and check out our merch store. We are adding new things day by day, so be on the lookout for a lot there right now. A lot more to come. Rob has a website.com/shop. And of course, if you are interested in more from any of our sponsors of the podcast, you can go to our special sponsor page at robhasawebsite.com/offers. Thank you so much, Scott St. Pierre. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.